Welcome back to the FanSpeak Network and a live edition of the Sibling Showdown. I'm Meg, and you can follow me at Megs08DFS on Twitter. I'm joined by my sibling, Steve, who you can follow at SteveOSpeak on Twitter. And today we are, of course, talking about the Thursday night football game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, in Philly. Quick news updates. It looks like Kenny Gainwell is out. So we'll see if Rashad Penny was a healthy scratch last week. We'll see if he is active. I assume he's active, and his role. That's something to talk about. Other than that, you have the Kirk Cousins in primetime narrative. If you want to play that, wasn't kind. It's actually, I actually read a Rich Rebar article. It's actually not as bad with the Vikings as we think, but the bad ones are bad. And last time they faced each other in week 2 last year, it was bad. So we probably have that kind of ingrained in our memory. So anyways, Steve, with all that said, general thoughts for the slate, and then we'll kind of, talk through some specific points to go through, run the Sims, which we use to help us make our optimal decisions, and then go over to DraftKings. But general thoughts for the slate, how do you see this game shaking out?
Yeah, no, it's obviously very interesting. We saw this game in prime time last year, week 2, Monday night, and it went real bad if you're a Vikings fan. Eagles were the smash play. Jalen Hurts had a monster game. Really didn't bring much of his players along with him. They were all fine, but it was just Hurts just absolutely crushed the Vikings. And you really didn't. I think the run back you wanted was Irv Smith. So that tells you how bad the Viking side of it was that game. But no, I think this time we had 2 top offenses, and the Vikings they lost week 1 to the Buccaneers, but they. Cousins threw for well over 300 yards, had 2 touchdowns, probably could have had another one. I know there was a fumbled snap, and he did throw 1 interception, but I think they were one of the highest pass rate teams last year, and I think they're going to remain that this year. From the Eagles side, their offense started strong in the first half, and then really didn't play well into the second half, but they got the W, and we'll see how they look against this Vikings defense, which has been pretty porous the last couple of years. So I actually expect there to be a lot of points tonight. Vegas obviously expects that, and I do expect it to go back and forth both ways. So do like the Eagles at home, but I think we will see a closer game this year.
Well, yeah, because I mentioned obviously about the Kenneth Gainwell injury. There's other injuries to discuss. On the offensive side for Minnesota, they will be without Garrett Bradbury, I believe. They're starting, is he guard or center?
Center, I believe.
Center. And then their tackle is Darashaw is questionable. Has there been any updates on him?
I haven't seen anything yet this morning. I'm sure we'll get something.
Yeah, so that's... something to monitor if 2 starting offensive linemen are out. Eagles, which I'll get to in a minute, are missing some pieces on defense, but their defensive line is still stout, and their pass rush. So that is something to consider as far as defense or Eagles defense and injuries to consider. Nakobe Dean, the linebacker, is out, and Bradbury, the cornerback, is out. Correct?
Yeah.
And then the safety. Starting safety, drawing a blank on his name.
Reed Blankenship.
Reed Blankenship is out. So 3 starters on the Eagles defense: linebacker, corner, safety. And they obviously had lost some pieces in their linebacking core and secondary in free agency as well. So that's something to consider, and it makes me really like Hawkinson actually a lot. We'll get to that more in a little bit. I actually like both tight ends, but yeah, so now let's bring over Run the Sims. Run the Sims. Well, let me bring it over now. Run the Sims is a tool that you can use to input I just ran with the base numbers. I don't know. Let me see. Let me blow this up. Can you see it good enough?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Run the Sims, you can input your base numbers, I ran with their inputs, but you can input score, pace, rush rate, and then obviously the different usage for different players. And then once you run it, you get the optimal results. And that's what we're looking at here. It kind of tells you how often they should be in the captain rate, the flex rate, projects their ownership, and kind of where you might be gaining some leverage. So with that, looking at this, Steve, it's to no surprise that obviously Jalen Hurts is both the most optimal in overall and in the captain, obviously. And then right behind that is, of course, Justin Jefferson. He didn't really do well in this matchup last year, but again, I think with a different secondary and some injuries, I definitely think Jefferson is obviously a guy you still want to bet on. Kirk Cousins is another one. And then, of course, it gets into the, with Gainwell out, DeAndre Swift, Alexander Madison, the Eagles receivers, and Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown, and then further down the tight ends, Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert. So while we're looking at this, and then, of course, as you could see on Run the Sims, you can look through different custom lineups, different projections based on, again, your numbers. So, again, we use Run the Sims to kind of get that baseline. We can then tweak it and then to our own game script. And, like if you thought, for instance, that Rashad Penny would get more work, you could plug it in, see what that does. So definitely something to consider to check out Run the Sim. So with that, is there anything that really sticks out to you here, Steve? And then I'll get into some kind of questions from our survey, and then we will build a lineup. So anything that sticks out to you here?
Yeah. So, I think obviously the main thing is Justin Jefferson. As you said, last year he didn't have a good game, but this is a different year. Like you said, different secondary. Not only that, Vikings have different weapons. They did not have T.J. Hawkinson when they played this game last year.
Correct.
They now Jordan Addison replacing Adam Thielen. Still have K.J. Osborne as the other piece. So, this could definitely be a different way that they could find ways to get Jefferson open. I'm sure Darius Slay will be on him a fair bit, but they just might be able to find different ways to get him open, given their personnel.
I think last year Slay only shadowed him like 22 to 25% of the time, something like that. It's not like, that kind of stuff. So you like the fact that they have more weapons this year as a way to, obviously, and of course the difference in the Eagles secondary as a way to, that you like Jefferson as an optimal play.
Yeah, I mean, he, obviously we saw what he did a year ago. We saw week one, his target share just absolutely dominated again. Didn't get a touchdown. That was his thing a year ago. He only had 8 touchdowns given all his targets. Yet he was wide receiver like 3 on the week. So it's like if he gets a touchdown, he can just absolutely smash. And that's what you're going to need. You're going to need him to get a touchdown, but he gets a touchdown with that level of target share, gets a 100-yard bonus. Potentially even 2 touchdowns in this type of game. Again, I think the Vikings are going to be throwing the ball 40 times, and Jefferson's going to get 25% or more of that. Where the Eagles receivers, the top 2 guys, are great. I mean, A.J. Brown has a great target share, no doubt about it. I think he had around a 30% target share.
Yeah, I'm looking at it
but
now.
Devonta Smith's right there, and they actively said, "Oh, we need to get Dallas Goedert more involved. We need to get Quez Watkins and the running backs more involved." So, whether that's coach speak or not, that's going to come from A.J. Brown, where Justin Jefferson, I just think it's plug and play what they did a week ago, essentially Jefferson, Hawkinson, and then Osborne and Addison kind of having that second tier target share.
Okay, let's now go back and break down, and you can see the survey on fanspeak.com where Steve and I break down favorite captains, favorite plays that we won in our lineups the most, favorite value plays, favorite contrarian plays, fades, that kind of stuff. Let's kind of hit through it quickly, and then we can build a lineup. So who Jalen Hurts is the obvious one. We don't need to cover that. Of course, obviously he's got that floor ceiling combo. He's going to be 30% owned in the captain. You can play it and you can get different elsewhere. I don't mind playing Jalen Hurts in the captain at 30% owned or whatever his ownership ends up being there. And then, have some contrarian pieces or a piece or 2 around that. That's fine. So we know Jalen Hurts we like as a captain. That's obvious. Who would be your other priority captains? I assume Justin Jefferson is number 2. And for all the reasons we just talked about, his target share, which I just looked at, it was 30%, or target share was 25%, air yards was 34%. So I mean, that's the kind of stuff you want. He's always going to probably be looking to get 10 plus targets, especially in a competitive game environment like this. So Justin Jefferson, I assume, is number 2 for us. Who would be number 3, 4 for you as far as captain targets?
Yeah. So
And
the
it can
next
be
two,
any price. We can kind of cover, like, just lump it all together if
yeah.
you're trying to get value and then kind of jam in some more, raw point plays, or if you're looking to get another stud captain. Who are your next 2 to 3 captains of any price?
Yeah, so the next two, it's hard to separate the Eagles receivers because they're both
Yeah,
so
it
good.
really is. Yeah.
But I do like AJ Brown. I do think he has the slight edge, of course, and so I'll just go with that. And the Vikings secondary is just really bad.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield was, doing pretty well against them, and we saw last year. I mean, pretty much any team could throw against them. So yeah, I am fine with either Eagles receiver, but like AJ Brown. My fourth one would probably be TJ Hawkinson. He was right there next to Jefferson in terms of targets. Again, you talked about with the injuries and what they lost. Eagles lost linebackers and safeties in free agency. And that's also who's injured, Nakobe Dean and Reed Blankenship. So they're much thinner there than they were a year ago. Hawkinson, we know, has been a target monster since he's come over to Minnesota. That should continue. And yeah, he'll need, maybe even 2 touchdowns to be an optimal captain. But this is the type of game where it can happen for sure. So I don't mind betting on that kind of thing. And then my like really like lower, cheaper owned guy would be Dallas Goedert. And that's just betting on, I've said it all off season. This is a guy who was on pace for 1,000 yards as a tight end last year. Only on pace for about 4 or 5 touchdowns, but as a tight end, and their passing touchdown rate wasn't tremendous last year. I think it's going to be better this year. He's just so good and should be involved. He wasn't week 1, so I think his ownership will be down. And because he wasn't involved, his price is down. So you put Goddard in the captain, you can have a stud lineup without.
Yeah, I've already played around with that. Absolutely.
So that's the one fun thing. If he does get, say, 8 targets and gets a touchdown, guess what? You could get all the fantasy points of all the other stuff.
Yeah, and I know he only only had 1 target last week, but obviously that was a mistake. The coach admitted it. I know this is a new offensive coordinator. Maybe they need to get over some of these bumps and hurdles. That was a mistake. I think they know they need to get him more often. I just double checked. He was in on 86% of routes run. So it's not like he wasn't out there running routes. He just wasn't targeted. And I think they need to get him targets. In the same matchup last year, he went 5 for 82. So I would think that's more the range he should be in. And then obviously a red zone target and that kind of stuff. Spoiler alert, I bet him as my first touchdown. You can check out our live show at 3:00. I will be with Spread Astaire, Tyler Hicks, talking bets for tonight, but also the whole week. Our favorite spreads, our favorite money lines, some anytime touchdowns, first touchdowns for tonight, some same game parlays. We cover it all. It's our NFL betting card. Check it out, 3 p.m. here on the FanSpeak Network. I like the tight ends today. I'm with you, Steve. I mean, first of all, like you said, the Eagles with their personnel, that's somewhere where you can attack as far as the tight ends against the Eagles. Look what, like you said, what Hunter Henry did last week. And then on the other side, for Goddard, I think, the Vikings were about middle of the pack last year as far as tight ends versus, the Vikings, but, Goddard did rather well in this same exact matchup last year. So I just think, let's, play off the narrative that he didn't get much of anything, but was out there running routes and go to that. So I'm big on the 2 tight ends. Other than that, the only thing I'd say is if you want to be ultra contrarian and, play like a Rashad Penny, if you think he's getting all the work. I mean, if he pops in for 2 touchdowns, he lets you truly get whatever you want. Now, again, you're playing off, this guy was a healthy scratch last week, but his ownership is now projected to be low. We're talking less sub 20% in the flex, 1% in the captain. These are the kind of things that, Eagles running backs have always kind of been a mirage to me. Last year, it was even with Miles Sanders. Sometimes he'd get 2 touchdowns. Sometimes it would be Gainwell or Scott. So, you just never know. And if he gets more of that base down worth, I don't mind just utilizing him. But let's get into our flex plays. And so for me, I don't see myself having a ton of Cousins. And no, it's not the, Cousins pisses his pants in primetime narrative. It's actually more just, what are all you can afford, and liking other expensive guys. So yeah, I kind of prioritize those top guys that we just talked about. Obviously Hurts, obviously the two Eagles receivers, obviously Jefferson, Hawkinson, Goddard. But and I know you like all those plays too. So we don't need to, we know that we love those plays, but they're expensive. So you're going to try to get access to some combo of those plays as much as possible. Who else are you trying to get a lot of access to? Or it could be defense or kicker too.
Yeah. So, I'm going to have a little Cousins. What I will say is I'll probably have 0 Cousins in the captain.
Right.
I'll have some in the flex, but yeah, probably less than normal, just because I think if you have Jefferson and Hawkinson, you have a lot of Cousins value, and can get it that way. But from the Philly side, we kind of talked about their big 3, so and then Goddard as well. So you're guessing on the running backs, Swift and Penny. They have some value, but the other value play, who ran her out on pretty much every time, was Quez Watkins. He only got like 2 targets, but again, a guy who's out there that often. He's very cheap. I'll take a shot, because we've seen this in these kind of showdowns. One big 50-yard touchdown, and he's in the optimal as a flex play,
especially at that price, of course.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm definitely interested in him. And then Minnesota's kind of the same thing. Like, we know who's going to be out there. It's going to be Osborne and Addison. Last week they utilized 2 tight ends a bit more and a fullback more in Josh Oliver and CJ Ham. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that this week in probably more of a shootout type game. So I would expect Addison's routes to be up even higher, and he had 6 targets in roughly only 55% of the routes, I think it was. So definitely bodes well for him. And of course, KJ Osborne was pretty much out there in 2 wide receiver sets, and he had 6 targets as well. So I think they're both really good, and Osborne's very underpriced. I am just going to be off on Alexander Mattison. Yeah, he got a good amount of workload, but he was just very inefficient. And, I just don't know if they're going to be able to
especially
run.
against that Eagles front. And then again, in the game script, if you think Eagles are playing from head too.
And like you mentioned with the Vikings offensive line injuries, I just don't see them being able to run. Yeah. And while Ty Chandler only got a handful of snaps last week, that could change this week in a game script where they need a more dynamic pass catcher.
Yeah, what's Chandler's price actually?
Very cheap. So, he would be a complete dart throw.
That's interesting. Yeah. That actually might be an interesting game script play, offensive line issues play, just a guy they can dump it off to more.
Yeah. So, we'll see. And they might, he's the only second-year guy, was pretty much inactive all year and injured. So maybe they just don't trust him enough in a game like this. But so we don't know, but it's at least a theoretical sense that they need playmakers, and he's a much better receiving back than Madison. So, if game script starts dictating that, maybe he's out there and picks up 4 or 5 catches, 50 yards, something like that.
Okay, so we talked through the captains we like. They're kind of obvious, but we talked through a couple of ones that could be more contrarian, like a Goddard or Hawkinson. If you want to get really wild, obviously Penny would be a really contrarian captain. We talked through players that we want a lot of exposure to in general. You kind of covered it down the board. But rank your values, because we've mentioned a lot of values here, all the way down to like a Ty Chandler and Rashad Penny. Obviously, Swift is priced very low. We talked about Quez Watkins. I'm talking like under the kickers, basically. Because obviously you can obviously kickers and defense are somewhat of a value too. But like those real cheap values, how do you rank those?
Swift is the same. Starts under Elliott, but above Joseph. So I'll go with Swift. I'll go it in Swift, Watkins, Penny, Chandler, and then I do think Josh Oliver. They could be in 2 tight end a little bit, and he's 800. He did get a couple targets, but I
didn't realize he got 3 targets last week.
I will add in. I think of the two kickers, I think Greg Joseph is a fine kicker. I will take Elliott, the guy who's more likely to be ahead, and this is his home stadium, so he's more used to kicking outdoors versus Greg Joseph, who typically kicks indoors. So if I'm going to take a kicker, it would be Elliott.
Okay.
And I think Elliott's one of the best kickers.
Well, I think that helped to rank the values, and I have a lot of the same interests in the same values. I would say that I may have a little more exposure to Penny, just because from the contrarian aspect, if he does come in like 15 to 20% owned, especially closer to 15, I do think that is interesting because I just know how this Eagles backfield goes, and to me, I don't think Swift is that much higher he's projected for, I believe, like 60, 65%. I don't believe he's that much higher in this situation. I know he can be explosive, and I know what DeAndre Swift can do, but he's going to be kind of chalk. That's why I have some, more interest in Penny in that contrarian aspect. And then I like the other values. Definitely interested in the other values you mentioned, obviously Swift being chalk, probably in some more like single entry type builds. And then, like the Quez Watkins play, I do like a lot as well. As far as defense and kickers, I have interest in the kickers, probably like you said, more so the Eagles kicker. I also have interest in the Eagles defense. I don't know if there's an update on this yet, but right now I believe the Eagles defense, I thought they were going to be chalkier. Let me see if I can find this quickly. I thought they were only projected for sub 15% owned. Did you see that? Yeah, it's looking like, and that surprised me. Actually, an updated ownership I'm seeing around 2021, but that kind of surprises me. If you can get the Eagles defense at 21% owned, 2 offensive linemen out for, especially one definitely offensive lineman out, potentially 2 offensive linemen out. Yes, if you want to buy into the Kirk struggles in prime time. And this is on the road. The Lincoln Financial Field is not an easy place to play at night. No. And Kirk knows that better than anybody because he had to deal with it when he played there at least once a year when he was with Washington as well. And then, obviously he's played there several times in Minnesota as well too. So, this is not an easy place to play, especially at night. I think the Eagles defense, I know you don't expect them to get a defensive touchdown like they did last week every week, but I definitely think they're in play given just the situation. And again, I honestly thought they were going to come in like 35% owned or something.
I think it's just a similar situation of since we have guys like Watkins and Penny, particularly who are priced under them, if they're not getting a touchdown, those guys have good bets to get over 10 fantasy points. If Watkins catches like 2 balls for 40 yards, he's at 6. So so
no, that makes
I agree. Like Eagles would be the one I would play, but I'd take Elliott over the Eagles when talking specifically kickers and defenses combined.
Okay, before we build a DraftKings lineup, we covered captains, covered just kind of our favorite players, covered values, covered contrarian plays, covered fades. We're both fading Madison. Who is your this is who I have to have in almost every lineup play? And it can be of any price. Actually, how about we take out like Hurts and Jefferson? Because that's just 2, obviously. Not Hurts and Jefferson, who is I'm pretty much going to have him in every lineup play.
It will probably be Hawkinson.
Okay. I like it. And for the reasons you mentioned, Kobe Dean out, different defensive, different personnel for the Eagles defense this year. You can target the Eagles defense, the tight ends. Henry, was tight end 1 last week, which sounds hysterical, but hey, we both like the late tight around and strategy in best ball that proved itself in week 1. I mean, it helped that Andrews and Kelsey were out, but you get what I'm saying. Henry was tight end 1 with a good performance against the Eagles. I could definitely see Hawkinson putting up a good line today. I like the Hawkinson call. Mine's kind of a 2-parter. I'm going to have a lot of Goddard on the other side, but I might have a lot of 2 tight end builds actually, just because I like that contrarian aspect. I think he's going to be around more in that 25% own range, I'm guessing. We'll see when it's all said and done. And he's affordable. I think he has the ceiling, and I think he's going to be definitely coming in a little lower owned overall. And then, part 2 of that is, if Rashad Penny's ownership stays down, and if especially we get any kind of beat reports or clues that, it's going to be a mixed backfield and not just, Swift is going to have the primary role. And, if there's anything kind of news that seems shady on the Penny situation, I might back off that stance. But as long as he's active and, we think he could get a base role, I think it's worth, I could see it happening over 20% of the time. Let's just say him being in that optimal. So it won't be in all of my lineups, but it'll definitely be in a good chunk of my lineups. So Goddard and Penny for me, Hawkinson for you. While I'm bringing over DraftKings, why don't you give a score prediction for the people and your favorite first touchdown, which I'll put on the sheet if you want me to.
Yeah. Score prediction. I do think it's going to be high scoring. I will say 35-31.
Oh, that's very high scoring. Yeah. You really think that high scoring week 2?
Yeah. I just think I think there's a lot of talent in the receiver and tight end rooms. I think you have 2 quarterbacks who can be very good. And I think there are questions enough on the Eagles back end and definitely questions on the Vikings defense.
Okay. So you're kind of questioning the Eagles defense with what they're missing. Obviously we're all questioning the Vikings defense. So you definitely think it could be 65 plus points then.
Yeah. That's obviously the high end, but I think this could be a mini shootout. I think the Vikings offense has some of the most potential. They left a lot of points on the field last year, passing wise, given their passing rate. And I think they're just improved in that area with, again, full season Hawkinson, Addison, et cetera. And I think the matchup's fine. And of course we know what the Eagles can do.
All right. Who's your anytime touchdown of the game here? Are you going to go Hawkinson? Or I went Goddard. Are you going to go Hawkinson? Are we both going to make our tight end stands here?
I will. I think from
pull up the odds.
I think the odds Hawkinson is the very good play, but I really like AJ Brown to get a touchdown in this game. Okay,
so AJ Brown obviously anytime is plus 125. AJ Brown first touchdown is plus 850. So. All right, so you see AJ and Brown getting in the end zone. Now let's build a lineup. So how would you want to build this lineup? Would you want to go one of our more contrarian, cheaper captains to start, or do we just plug Hurts in and then make it work from there?
You know what? Let's go with the cheaper captain to start.
Okay, you want to go Hawkinson or Goddard? Because that was kind of each of our flag.
Let's go Hawkinson.
Okay. Oops. That did not put in the captain. Okay, so Hawkinson. Do we do Jefferson Hurts and then?
I think so.
Okay. Do we do I think you kind of, if you're doing Jefferson Hurts and Hawkinson, even a Hawkinson captain, it's still tough to get Cousins in there, but it is a little weird without Cousins. Though the story, tell the story, the week 1 showdown, 2 years ago, it was Cowboys Bucks. Mm-hmm. You had a tight end in the captain, another receiver, and not Brady, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
and that was a shootout with Dallas Bucks. Yeah,
shootout Dallas Bucks, and I faded Mike Evans and Brady, and I had Dak and 2 of his pass catchers in the flex positions. And I had Gronk in the captain, Godwin, and Antonio Brown in the flex. So that was the way. Because
I think a lot of people would say, well, you did tight end in the captain, another pass catcher, you have to just jam. Like I think most people would make a rule. You know what I mean? But it all depends on and listen, in that situation. Obviously, Gronk was probably cheaper than Hawkinson. Cousins is affordable, but still, it's that you did want to jam, jam the Dallas offense pieces that you wanted, and you weren't able to get Brady with the 2 pass catchers, and you got the 2 pass catchers, and you chopped, and you chopped to win that tournament. week 1 2 years ago. So
Mhm.
kind of in that same vein, we're doing, without Cousins, Hockenson, Hurts, Jefferson. What cheap play do we plug in, and then we'll leave 2 spots open? What's your favorite cheap play?
I'll go Quez Watkins. I just think he's out there so often. It just takes one big play.
Okay, so
And
3,000. So that leaves you 6,500. So you could do a lot of different things with that.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you want to do like one of a defensive kicker in one spot and then go up somewhere, or one of the cheap running backs, or stay in the mid range and Goddard, and do a 2 tight end build. I think that leaves you a lot of different flexibility.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that start. I think a lot of my starts are going to have, obviously Hurts and Jefferson's going to be in everything. So that's going to be whoever's in the captain and then making it work with those kind of last couple of pieces. So we kind of talked it through how it's going to go. Any final thoughts for the people before we get on out of here?
Yeah, no, I think obviously Hurts and Jefferson are definitely top 2 captain plays, and then
flex,
followed by the other 2 Eagles receivers. But I do think Hockenson especially should be considered, just because it does allow you to get a little bit more overall. And I do think these offenses are condensed enough where, like taking a Watkins or taking the Eagles cheap, one of the Eagles cheap running backs, that can be enough where you're getting like 5 really good plays.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like that. Well, I think we covered it all. I like it. You can go again, check out our articles on fanspeak.com. Basically, the written version of this is on fanspeak.com right now. It is the Showdown survey. Also, be sure to like this episode, subscribe to the Fanspeak Network, and check us out at 3:00 live. I've got Spread a Stare, Tyler Hicks. We are going to be talking through our NFL betting card. Had a very good Thursday night last Thursday. We each hit a bet. You picked David Montgomery anytime touchdown, right, Steve?
Yeah.
Spread had Amon-Ra first touchdown. I had Lions money line. Tyler had over Josh Reynolds. He blew receiving. We blew past that. So we had a good betting card for last Thursday. We're planning on having another one for this Thursday. Check us out at 3:00 on the Fanspeak Network, and check out our content on fanspeak.com. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.